In this video, I will briefly review the topic of nested loops in Python. Now that we are familiar with for loops and while loops, we can start thinking about nested loops. So very similar to nested if statements, where we had one if statement that's within another if statement. Nested loop works in the same way. So basically it's a loop that's contained inside another loop. So what happens is that the inner loop cycles will go through of itself completely, and it will do the iterations, and once the inner loops iterations are done, then we will have one iteration of an outer loop. So basically whatever that's inside of it, it will go, and then it will move to the outer loop, and it will repeat that. So basically we can say that the inner loop is going through its iteration faster than the outer loop, and the total number of iteration is going to equal to number of inner iteration multiplied by outer iterations. Now this is an example of how a nested loop would work. So we have an outer loop. Let's say we want to in this example we want to form a clock simulator. What we do is that first we start with the hours. So let's say hour 1, and then once that's assigned, then we will go to assign the minutes, basically starting with minute 1. If we want a full clock, we will repeat that process until the minute is done. And in this example we also have seconds. So this is actually an example of 3 nested loops. So first 1 to 60 times the inner loop for seconds will run. It will produce all the seconds in a clock in 1 minute, and then we have 1 minute here, and then we'll have 60 minutes. So that's already 60 times 60, and once these went through, then we have one change in the clock loop. So the total number of loops that this diagram is going to run is going to be 60 times 24. Now let's look at some examples in practice to see how that would work. Okay, so let's run a basic example to see how nested loops could work. So we can start with a very simple 2-layered, 2-stepped nested loop. So I'm going to say for I in range 6, and then we start the second one. We can say for j in range 6, let's put it like that. We can say print j, and then we add a separator. So basically what this does, it will stop this program to move to the next line. And then we were gonna add, once that loop is done, we can add just an empty line. So we'll skip and provide one line between the program. Okay, so let's run this. What we see is that now we see that the number 0 to 5 has been printed 6 times. So what happened? First thing first, we had the inner loop that will go for 1 full round. So in this example, first number 0 was printed all the way to 5, and between each of these instances we had a separator, which was just a space. And once that's done, a line was printed. So we'll go to next line, and then for I, then I will start from like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 times 5, this line was printed. We can change this slowly, just if you want to see how the numbers are being formatted. So let's say if I starts from 0 all the way to 5, so we will see that these numbers going to go up incrementally. So in the first example, we have only 1 that's printed, and the range is 1 to 1. So one time this loop is going to go through, and for the second line, it's going to increase all the way until we have all of these numbers. In the same way, we can basically form a simple multiplication table. So let's see how we can do it. We can just assign a range. Let's say we want to have a table of 5 by 5. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to create a range, or actually I can just not do it. Let's just say for I in range 1 to 5, and then for j the same thing. And what we want to see is that we want to say print I times j is equal to I times j. Alright, so, and again, like before, let's say we want to have one line to separate every time this goes through. Okay, let's run this code. And the result, we see that, again, the inner loop will start from 1. It will go all the way. I is going to be 1. And it's going to go all the way from all this range. And it stops at 4. So if we wanted this 5 by 5, we should run until 6. And then I is going to turn 2, and this table is going to continue all the way until we have all of the numbers that we're looking for. So let's run another example where we were talking about running values in a clock. I can just start it small. Let's say we just want to see all the seconds that are being printed in a clock. We can say for the range of 0 to 60, print seconds. If we do this, we will have all the numbers starting from 0 all the way to 59. And then we don't need 60 in this case, because 60 is going to be the next 0. Now to make it a little bit more complicated, now I can put this within the context of a nested loop. So I can say 4 minutes. In the same way, in the range 60. And now we want this nested, so we can say seconds and separate them by comma. So we can say minutes and separate it by comma, and then seconds. We have to indent this properly. So if we do that, we see that now we have all the values that, well, we probably want to reverse this. So it's actually going to be minutes and then seconds to make sense. So that's going to start from 0 all the way to 60 minutes. So if we scroll all the way down, we should see that's 60 or 59. 59 is the latest value. And now we can also add the hour for this. So we can say for hour in range 24. Now we're going to indent this, indent that, indent this one more time. I want to add hours, and then the same separator. So we're going to have now hour, minute, and seconds. For hours, Okay, now if we look at the output, we see that we should see all the values until we have 20. So this is an example of every second, every minute, and every hour, let's say in a 24-hour format. You can just basically scroll down until you have all the values, but you'll see it at the end. Alright, so these are again some simple examples of how to run a nested if state, nested for loop.